This week's famous artist is Greco, who is known for doing his very elongated, tall, slender figures. And so your students will be doing a self-portrait, but doing it in a much taller, elongated Greco type style. For the materials, you're going to need 2 white pieces of paper per student. I just have regular printer paper here. I'm going to set one aside because we're only going to be using one now. And we also need tape, glue sticks, colored pencils, scissors, and pencils. I'm going to use a black pen because it's a little bit helpful when we draw the outline, but that's optional. And then also on the blog, you'll see in the lesson plan that you have a printout of 1 piece of paper with 3 figures on it. So you would simply cut along the figures so that each student has 1 piece of paper like this. And you also want to have one for yourself. So if you have a class of 8, then you would print out 3 of this page, have 8 for your students and 1 for yourself to show this as an example. So each student will have one of these, and after you talk about Greco and show some of his paintings to the students and they see his style, then they begin to work on the project themselves. Using these gray dotted lines as the guidelines, they will cut the figure into strips. And then once they cut out each piece, and it's kind of nice to lay them in order so they don't get mixed up, we're going to glue them, but in an elongated way. To do this easily, make sure it's spaced out as evenly as possible. I'm going to start with the head at the top, add my glue to it, but I'm going to line up the top of this paper with the top of my new piece of white paper, and that's going to be where the paper begins. Now I'm going to set aside the middle pieces, and I'm next going to glue down the feet. If we start in the middle, the students might either run out of space or have too much extra space left over. So we're going to start with the top and then also line up the bottom of the paper with the bottom of this paper. And this will hopefully give a more equally spaced design. So now I can put in these pieces in the middle and go one by one until they're all adhered, just like that. And you can see that there's now spaces of negative space in between the strips that I've already cut out. In just a minute, we're going to take our pen or pencil and fill in those much like we would do connect the dots. We are going to go from line to line and fill in that space to complete that figure. Once I have him or her all done, I'm going to take my pen and simply go from one spot to another, connecting this. So you can see that all of a sudden this head is very, very long, almost like an alien, but it's taken the shape of the body and stretched it out. So I'm going to go through. And the reason that I'm using a black pen is just because when we do trace this on the window, the black will show up a little bit more. If you just have pencils, that's fine. It might be a little bit less bold for the students to be able to see when they trace, but it'll probably still be fine. And if they press dark enough with their pencil, it should show up. The black is just a little bit more consistent to see. And you can see that, oops, I put his legs off. So actually I do want to fix that. So just remind those students to line up the top and bottom more equally than I did, and probably with the parents' help that will be much more doable. So now I'm going to connect his ankles with his legs, just like that. The next step is to go over to a window, and you're going to be using your tape, your figure outline that you elongated, and the new piece of paper to trace it, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Once you have the images of the elongated figures taped up onto the window, then you would take your second piece of clean white paper and tape that on top, and then use the light that's coming in behind the window to trace the figure onto the new piece of white paper. So I'll just do this for a second, but you get the idea of how students would do that. So I'm going to finish that in just a second, but once I was done completing the entire outline, then I will take it back to my desk and finish up the project. Once you're done tracing, you no longer need that first image of the outline. Now the students will just focus on completing the final outline of the elongated figure, the one that they just traced on the window. So they can now take their pencil and they can add clothes. They can do a self-portrait of them in the El Greco style, or maybe do a picture of their brother or sister, their mom or dad. They can think about who they want to make this figure into, and still seeing that it's based in El Greco's way of making them tall and slender. So they can draw all the things they want to draw, hair, all that good stuff, and then use their colored pencils to go in and complete the entire drawing.